Good evening and welcome to the Black Robe podcast. I am Carol Mitchell, one of the hosts of the podcast, and tonight I am sad to say that my co-host Anjanae Slaughter is not with us. She is home taking good care of herself because, you know, there's all kinds of creepy crawly things around making us sick and tired these days. So we are glad that she's home resting and getting well, and we'll see her again on the podcast very soon. But we're thrilled to have our special guest with us. We have been waiting for months to get her on this podcast, and we're excited about her. She is an attorney, she's an author, she's funny as hell, which you will all find out tonight. Nicki Blake-Chafetz, welcome to the Black Robe podcast.
Hi, everybody. I'm a retired lawyer, but everything else was true.
Oh, well, you know, lawyers are like doctors, right? You never stop really practicing, do you?
I have the information.
Yeah, and folks are still calling you, I'm sure, on the weekends. Can I ask you a quick question? I know you're getting those calls. But I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about gun violence. The Institute for Black Justice has been discussing this topic. We had an event called Let the Kings Talk last week, where young African-American men talked about guns and gun violence, Nicki, and talked about the impact that it had on their lives. And I know you and your family have been personally impacted by gun violence as well. But as a lawyer, can you talk just a little bit about your personal view of things as it relates to why there seems to be an uptick in gun violence right now? What do you think is going on in the world that's causing this rise in homicides? Apparently, the number of solved cases is going down. We know what that might be about. But what's your take on what's happening socially to us?
Well, my dearly departed best Black friend from high school, Hank McCoy, put it to me this way, and I've adopted this, and he died last year, and I'm still affected by his death. He said, you know, Nick, I thought it would be different because we have the technology to record the police violence now. I said, me too. I said, all of this time, you know, when I was a young public defender, it began public defense work in 1991 before I had my own law firms. And I remember case after case after case coming into Seattle courts where, you know, guys coming in for a misdemeanor, and he comes into the court the first time he's beat the hell up. Well, I mean, you know, he is stopped for a routine violation. How'd he get beat up? So then you go to court and you say, you know, Judge, we do believe there's been police violence and that the evidence that's resultant should be repressed. Well, and the cops are like, and the police say, no, we didn't do it. As a matter of fact, he attacked us. And next thing you know, the guy's in jail, serving time, right? Because if a cop said he didn't hurt you and you said he did hurt you, even if you're all messed up in the grill, the cop was right. Well, as a matter of fact, I specifically remember judges saying, why would the police officer lie, Ms. Blake? And I'm like, well, because he just smashed this guy in the face. That's why. I mean, to me, it was very obvious. But then when my alum, Hank McCoy, said, Nicki, this ain't right, you know, he said, after we've got the technology, it didn't even slow up. You know, we all thought, well, we've got production companies in our pocket now. The police violence will come to a stop naturally because they don't want to be recorded. Guess what? We were wrong. We were wrong. It's not slowed down. And I'll say it to any Democrat and any Republican. This is not a partisan issue. Police violence against Blacks doesn't decrease when Democrats are president. It's not a partisan issue.
No, we know that it was during the Clinton administration that, you know, 3 strikes and all of that came about, right? So,
and we're going to talk about my book a little later, but when I left the reservation and started driving around the country, I'll tell you what, the most racist thing that happened to me north of the Mason-Dixon line. So I want us to stop thinking about racism is some Southern shit. It's not. Never has been. I mean,
we should warn people watching the podcast tonight.
What'd you say?
We should warn people that this is not for children tonight, because Nicki is going to be speaking very plainly.
Oops.
So if you have some child under 12, or if you,
I can also be better.
No, you don't need to be better. You can just be Nicki, because, this is a grown folks podcast tonight. But we're going to talk about your book, because you got into a car and drove all over the United States, and you wrote this book, My Travels in Trump Land, and it is an amazing book. We're going to tell people where they can find it. And as usual, we're going to buy, the IBJ buys a number of copies, and we just give them away to folks in the community who might not be able to afford it. But I want to know about your own. So you were a public defender, which means you helped keep folks out of jail who were accused of crimes and maybe themselves involved in gun violence. Our event the other night, Nicki, we had a protest, and it was an interesting protest because the film we showed, one of the characters in the film had committed a drive-by shooting, and the documentary film was about that event, partly about that event. The family of the victim, these are real people, real families, real lives being affected, came to the screening of the film, and they were understandably upset because I think they felt that the film sort of made a victim out of the person who committed the drive-by shooting. So I know you had to see victims, and your own family experienced loss and harm and trauma. How do we balance that out? On the one hand, we try to keep innocent people out of prison, but in some cases they're guilty.
It's not us. It's not Black folks that have to balance this stuff out. We do a really good job with it. We really do. I mean, if our son's a drive-by shooter, we're going to visit him in prison. We love him. But we're also not the families that support people who have done the wrong thing. We support them because we're their family. We don't go out and say, yeah, that was right. I mean, we're not Kyle Rittenhouse's family, right? Black families don't do that. As a matter of fact, if a Black person commits a sexual crime against a minor, I mean, you hardly ever see them in prison. I think we take care of them. I really do. I actually, people ask me that all the time. Do Blacks commit fewer sexual crimes? I actually believe that we do, right? Because the police are watching us all the time. That would then be the only case where Black folks commit fewer crimes than white folks, and it's of record, right? So it's not like the cops aren't around looking out for us to do sexual deviancy. We just don't. That's not us. It started in Greece. It didn't start in Africa. And so that tends not to be our issue. And you can ask any public defender that. I mean, people don't like to talk about it because we don't like to talk about how white people are broken, right? But that's one of the ways. We do not commit sexual crimes at as large, especially sexual crimes against children, in the numbers that white people. I'm not saying there's no Black perverts, but there are much fewer. And you can ask any public, every time I say that, people challenge, ask a public defender that's retired then about their caseload. Any public, there's no studies about it because we don't study how white people are broken.
Look out now. You're saying we don't look at ACEs scores of especially, let's say, middle
Come on now.
class and upper
Come on
middle
now.
class
Come on
white
now.
people.
Universities are run by white people, white professors, and what for whatever, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's a good reason we don't research the way white people are broken. Why don't we research the fact that white people can behave for a certain amount of time, never longer than 2 generations, right? But at some point in time, we're going to come back and back and back to how much better they are than everybody else, right? Right? There's no such thing as Black supremacism. There actually is. I could talk about that. But it's so much different from what white supremacism is. Afrocentrism, to the Hotep degree, could be considered a type of bigotry, except for Blacks don't own the glass ceiling, right? So it's irrelevant. So what? They're bigots. You still can get a job anywhere you want. But the example I like to give is, and the example would predate Bill Cosby, the problem years, right? But the example I would like to give is that Bill Cosby thought that it was his job, just like it was old white Hollywood's job, to put Black people behind cameras and not just in front as talent. During classical Hollywood, white stars would get their children who weren't talented. You know, obviously, if they were talented, they would sing or dance or whatever. But if they weren't talented, they would get them a job as a cameraman, a gaffer, something like that. So Cosby made it his job to do that. And not many people know that, but he was getting Black people behind the scenes in production. So
even if they weren't talented, because this is where I have an issue. If you know, and I have seen this with my own eyes, and I know you have too, working in public sector, where whole families of people be working at the government office together.
Yeah, at the same office. I'm from Chicago. You don't got to tell me. I'm from Chicago. I know graft is in my blood. I grew up in Chicago. Okay, I know it when I see it. I walk up to people and I say, "You're a graft hire, aren't you?" You know, because that's how it works. But what I'm trying to say about Cosby is he tried to get people behind the camera. So in my theoretical, and lawyers sometimes talk in theoreticals, in my theoretical, this is what they teach us in law school. A person, a white guy, he's a cameraman, goes into Cosby's production studio and says, "I'm the best cameraman in this state. I think you should hire me. I see you're looking to hire someone." And Cosby says, "No, I'm sorry, I can't have you. I'm looking for a Black cameraman." Well, has that cameraman suffered racism is the question. And I think we always need to correct people who loosely use the term racism. The Black Panthers have been telling us not to call behavior exhibited against members of the majority racism since the 60s. And most of us get that. Even most white people get that.
Not reverse racism.
Whatever they want to say, whatever they want to call it. But the truth is that you can't execute a racist action if you are not a member of the majority. And that's just definitional. So we like to say, I've been in the room with Black Panthers, so they've told me personally, we like to say that if you're Black, you might be a bigot, but you cannot be a racist because you do not control the glass ceiling. The white guy that goes in to ask Cosby for a job, he can just walk down to the block to a white production company and get a job. That's why Blacks can't be racist, even if we're wealthy. And we're just saying.
So I mean, what you're saying though is an argument, and I think it's a valid argument for owning things, right? If I own my company, then I can hire an all Black staff if I choose to, because I'm running it. I do have power over that little piece of the pie. But if I'm working inside of a governmental entity and public money is paying for what I'm doing, white or Black, should that be allowed? And I see it happening where there's whole families full of folks working in a particular governmental agency, or the cronies, the people who worked on the campaign, you know, everybody gets a job.
Right.
Whether they're qualified or not is irrelevant. And so I think when you're spending public money, there's a different level of accountability than when it's your own private business.
Sort
and
of.
even then, I don't
mean,
know if
in Seattle, as a Chicagoan, I see graft in Seattle all the time. Like there's a certain company, Marino or whatever, they get all the construction bids. You know, that's impossible. It's impossible in a blind bid situation that one bidder gets every bid. There's graft in Seattle, right? You know, it's just.
Have you ever seen all the sole source bids that come through the state? I'm on the list. And all, you know, it's like, how do I get to be a sole source where you don't even have to compete anymore? Millions and millions of dollars go to that. Yeah. But I want to talk for a minute. You know, we have detoured off from the gun violence piece to just, you know, the broader social issues of racism. But I want to talk about your learnings when you hit the road and set out from Seattle to, I don't know, Tupelo, wherever you ended up.
Exactly.
And you wrote this beautiful book called My Travels in Trumpland. First of all, why that title? And why did you do this? Because it doesn't sound like you would be the type of person who would just quietly roll through. Why do this?
Well, it all started. I quit lawyering in the middle of a trial. I feel like I had a visit from my father. My father was a friend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s, and I felt like during the Trump administration, he would not be doing nothing. And he came to me in a dream. He said, would I be doing nothing about Trump right now? I said, well, Daddy, I don't have your charisma, right? Because he was a leader. As a matter of fact, I was growing up in a town that had segregated schooling. It was in the damn north. It was near Chicago. And for years, you know, my family's legacy is that we changed that my father helped integrate the schools district, right? And it, if you YouTube search Reverend Eddis, Eddis, and Reverend Blake, Blake, you'll come up with a video of Reverend Eddis showing how he and my dad integrated the hometown I lived in. Reverend Eddis just died last year, but he outlived my father by about 20 years. And so the video is about how my dad and he got these revolutionary marches together that essentially stopped my hometown, Evanston, Illinois, the town of Northwest University, so that, you know, the racist councilmen and who didn't want their children be going to school with Negroes. I usually say it the other way. But they didn't want their children going to school with people that looked like me, right? So my father in Evanston and Reverend Eddis, Charles Eddis, Eddis, who was the Unitarian pastor in our town, but he has a long story. He came to town to break the law because there were it's called blue lining, right? You can't buy a house in a certain neighborhood. If it was in the black neighborhood and you're white, you couldn't buy a house there. So in the white neighborhood, you're black, you couldn't buy a house there. He came there to buy a house in the black neighborhood so his children and him could break the law, right? And he was my father's friend.
I've never heard of the blue line. I've heard of the red line, but I love this. This gives me, yeah.
Yeah, and so my father and him marched, you know, broke the town until the schools were integrated. I was just a baby. My father integrated town in time for me to go to an integrated grade school in kindergarten. But the night that King died, Reverend King came to our town and helped our revolution. which was very confusing because, of course, it was outside of Chicago, and people are like, doesn't King have bigger fish to fry than Chicagoland? And the answer is no, man. That's what I keep trying to tell people. Racism in the North is as bad as racism in the South. It's more pernicious in some way because it's more secret. It's not nigger this, nigger that. It's you can't have a house here because your children will be miserable because we're going to make your whole family miserable.
Or you can't build affordable housing in my neighborhood.
Right. Anywhere else but mine.
Yeah, affordable housing is proxy for people of color.
Right.
So same kind of thing. Or you can't, we have this thing in Tacoma right now where we're calling homelessness camping, right? So there's a ban on camping. And there's data that the county gathered.
Disproportionate number of veterans in those homeless campers, disproportionate number of African Americans in those homeless campers, a large number of children in the homeless campers.
Yes, yes, and yes. And so, being me, my feeling is, well, if they're camping, how come we don't put the same sort of amenities out there that we have up at Mount Rainier National Park? Where why don't you have some porta potties and
toilet, cafe, some tourist site, a cafeteria? Yeah.
It's not camping, folks. It's surviving. That's what they're doing. Yeah. And yes, disproportionately people of color, disproportionately veterans. And here's the deal, with the veterans that are out there, many of them, guess what? Dishonorably discharged. Well, why? Because they were behaving in ways that were disruptive. Well, why was that?
Because they were unhealthy, mentally.
Because they were looking at horrific acts, and you were making them do horrific things in the midst of war, and they were only 18-year-old boys when they came in. Right. And so, yeah, they have drinking problems and drug problems now because they can't cope with the trauma. And so they're homeless, some of them, many of them, and have mental health issues that need to be treated. So I'm wondering, what did you find out? What kind of attitudes did you see toward these kinds of issues as you were driving around Trump land?
Homelessness,
racism, economic deprivation, blue lining.
Believe it or not, I found out a lot of homelessness stuff because, I had a pretty big house. I still have that, a pretty big house with, coddled middle class lady issues. Like I used to tell people, I own a tomato knife, my friend. A knife salesman sold me a tomato knife because that's the kind of upper middle class lady I was, right? But when
there's a special knife for tomatoes.
Yes, girl. Yes.
I need one.
It looks like a little bread knife because it's serrated so that you don't. Anyway, yes. Anyway, so I took my coddled upper middle class professional self and I jumped in my car with really no plan except for I was disgusted with Trump land, right? I was disgusted with America. So I jumped in my car and I had a couple $1,000s in my pocket. And as it turned out, when I hit the road and I started talking about it on Facebook, people started sponsoring me, right? So I got off the road a lot. People bought me hotel rooms. I went to a Republican convention and people bought me a room to stay. Anyway, but most of the time I was car homeless, right? So I learned I'm thinking about writing a homeless book at some point in time, or maybe doing another experiment, because that was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't about racism. It was about poverty, really. That people, I was like, I'm one of you now. I'm one of you. I'm homeless. We're all the same. They said, you have a car. car homeless are different than homeless. So there's even a hierarchy in America in terms of homelessness, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. We can't get out of the caste system no matter what we do.
Yeah, it's a caste system. And I had a weird place in the caste because even listening to me talk, other homeless people knew that I didn't belong, right? I didn't belong in their rank. And if I was at a place with other homeless people and they thought they were being taken advantage of, they looked around and looked for me and they pushed me to the front and let me speak, right? So one of the things you asked me about what I learned about homelessness, and what I learned, one of the most important things I learned was that I learned that I grew up traveling America with my parents. My mother was a scrimper. My father was a minister. We hardly had any money to put in savings, but every year she saved up enough money that we could go on a 2-week vacation. We just hit the road and go somewhere, stayed in travel lodges, right? I had no idea that a way you could see America is to go from one truck stop to another. And I slept in a lot of truck stops. As a matter of fact, you asked me why the book was named My Travels in Trumpland. It used to be called, God, I can't, something trucker whore, because when I would be in these truck stops, sometimes
Nicki,
guys would assume I was a trucker sometimes, but sometimes they made the look and they were assuming I was a whore.
Excuse me, let me see now. Sex worker, I think, is now the appropriate professional term.
As I travel, sorry, ladies, and I'm sorry, I just thought it would sell more books, but as I traveled across the country, I was posting on Facebook, and one of my alum from Evanston High School told me, Nicki, that's called a lot lizard. A lot lizard is a lady who stays in truck stops waiting for her fare to come along.
So she's an entrepreneur.
An entrepreneur, right?
And I don't, no shade to an entrepreneur.
I slept a lot of nights in truck stops and what do you call those places? Stops that are run by the government. Blue signs.
Little rest areas.
Rest area. Yeah.
But weren't you a little bit intimidated by that, coming from your middle class tomato knife life, and you're sleeping in truck stops? You didn't feel scared, intimidated?
Funnest thing I've ever done in my life. It was amazingly fun. I'm not scared of people. I'm not scared of people, except for Trump. I'm scared of Trump because ignorance is scary. But I'm not scared of the folk, the people.
I'm just wondering about the circumstances. You know, there's a bit of a move underway down here in Tacoma. It's called something like Tacoma Safe. And the basic underlying premise, if I understand it correctly, is that we need more police in order for us to feel safe, right? And we need camping bans. We need people out of public spaces, you know, that are meant.
It's make me feel the opposite of safe.
Yeah, and I think that perspective is one that isn't amplified enough in the dialogue that we're having.
I'd rather
have
a volunteer check on the homeless people than the police. I don't want the police checking on anybody, especially my children.
Yeah, well, we've got the business owners basically packing because, you know, there are certain actors in any community, right? So whether homeless or not, there are going to be certain people in any community that are disruptive. And so those 1 or 2 or 3 people who have disruptive behavior cause the business community around some of these spaces that they use to point over there and say, you know, we need more police to deal with this problem.
Well, I mean,
in reality,
what they've done is take some of these people themselves and turn them into ambassadors, right? And so I'd rather see that happen. I've been moved along by a homeless guy, right? Because in downtown Seattle, if you're around late at night, one of these ambassadors will come and check on you, right? And they don't have guns. They're just former homeless people watching the sidewalks.
Former homeless people engaged to do what exactly?
They're called the downtown corridor ambassadors. And they do non-urgent sort of police work, moving people along. If you're on the sidewalk, you're not supposed to be there, move it along. If you're throwing garbage on the sidewalk, pick it up. If you're a tourist and you're in a seedy part of town and they tell you where to catch your bus. They're called ambassadors, and I'm not that familiar with the program, but I do know that they themselves, many of them once had homeless issues.
So besides homelessness, what else did you learn on your journey through Trump land? Any other nuggets that we might look forward to reading about in the book?
I was very surprised to learn. The most important thing I think I learned was that Trump's wall wasn't the most important wall during that administration. It was the wall that he erected between information and his followers.
Say more.
I talked to a lot of people, and it was amazing to me by how little they knew about what Trump had done while he was in office, because he's told them all not to watch, NBC, CNN, MSNBC. He's given them specific channels not to watch, which apparently includes all of the non-conservative press, right? Like CBS, the home of Morrow and, Walter Cronkite.
Yes, we all watched Walter Cronkite when we were growing up.
What I felt was the reason that Trump did not go to the annual broadcasters convention every year. Many people thought it was because he doesn't have a good sense of humor about himself. Of course he did not, right? But after this trip, I felt there was a deeper reason he doesn't go to the press party every year. And that's because if he goes, his followers will watch. And in the room full of comedians and people who have a general lack of respect for authority, they will learn for the first time things that they haven't known at all, because Fox News doesn't cover any negative news. Fox News, I asked my sister-in-law, who voted for Trump the first time, and I'm proud to say she didn't the second time, but she voted for Trump the first time. I asked my sister-in-law about the fact that Trump had allowed Russian spies into the Oval Office. And she says, first of all, and she literally said, that's fake news, right? That's fake news. I just want to assure everybody, this is not a Black Trump voter. There are some, but I didn't meet any. She said, that's fake news. And I said, honey, even Trump doesn't say it's fake news. All he said in his defense was, they promised me there'd be no pictures, right? That's not denying that it happened. First of all, for it not to be true, I wondered to myself if my sister-in-law would have believed the story if she'd read it in the Cyrillic from the Russian paper, which is how Americans found out. American press didn't find out because the American press was not allowed in the Oval Office with Trump and Russian spies, okay? The American press found out when they read it the next morning in Pravda, in Russian. So everybody knows this except for Trump's followers, because they're watching Fox News, where they don't cover negative news.
I mean, you raise a good point generally, though. I think for all of us, what I'm taking from what you learned about that specific group is that none of us should be that insulated and
It's a good.
We
None
should
of
all, every now and then we probably should turn on Fox just to see what they're
I
doing.
do it. I do it. I do it. But it's hard. Like every time I commit to watching Fox News for 7 days straight, I usually get like 35 minutes and I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah, it's
Do it. It's
there
like
is
brain rot.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's like brain rot.
But I mean, to your point about not allowing anyone, and especially not imposing on ourselves, this, sort of shutting off our information channels and only listening to people who agree with us. I mean, whether it's Twitter followers or not, or whoever, your Facebook page, wherever, you tend to attract people who agree with you or have similar points of view. But if you're going to be a truly well-informed human being, you sometimes do have to go to what you think is the dark side and
sometimes
at least consider.
A truly mentally healthy person, you have to block out all the crazy stuff. You're talking about normal human beings who function well, but you have to understand, not all Republicans, not the ones who are playing the dumb ones, right? But the ones who are being played, they're not really Republicans, man. They need services. The only thing the Republican Party has given the poor white man is the ability to be a bigot. They turn the other way. So like, if Democrats would turn the other way and say, you can be racist, that's okay, we need your vote too much, we could have them too, because they need us more than we need them, right? I mean, they actually take welfare. They need medical care. Their kids need to go to college, but because they're racist, they vote for the GOP because the GOP will turn the other way. If you're going to be a racist, I mean, that's fine. We can't acknowledge it on the record, but you have to know we appreciate you racists.
So we have to close this podcast in just a minute, but I do want you, I want you to tell people where they can find this book, My Travels in Trumpland, Nicki Blake-Chafetz. Am I pronouncing your name properly?
It doesn't matter because that's not my name anymore because that was my married name. It's okay. It's okay. My husband's name is Chafetz. It is really not his name. They were avoiding their Jewish last name, which was Chafetz.
Okay.
Anyway, Amazon, My Travels in Trumpland, Nicki Blake-Chafetz, Nicki Blake-Chafetz, Chafetz.
Thank you so very much for being on the podcast tonight. I mean, we covered a lot of ground, much like you in your car traveling through Trumpland. It's an amazing journey, an amazing story. And thank you for making it available so that people in all walks of life can enjoy it. And again, the IBJ will be buying some copies and making them available as well as gifts. So thank you for being here tonight. And thank you everybody for listening to the IBJ's Black Robe podcast. We will see you next time. Have a good weekend.